Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us for the webcast, Communicating with Employees in Truly Responsive and Agile Organizations, sponsored by Pool Everywhere. This webcast has been pre-approved for HRCI and SHRM credit. You will receive an email from HR.com within 2 business days, which will include the certification credit information. You may also log into HR.com and go to your View My Credits page, where you can see all the credits you have received with us. If you have any questions today during the webcast, click the Q&A in your webinar controls and type them there. A new tab will open on your browser with the webcast survey. Please make sure to complete it as soon as the webcast ends today. I'll also be posting a link to the survey in the chat, as well as a link to the slides for you to download today. Now, without further ado, it is my pleasure to turn the floor over to our presenter today, Sam Cauthen. Sam, take it away.
Thank you so much, Sherry. I am absolutely delighted to be with all of you today. This topic of employee communications, employee relations in agile, responsive organizations is very near and dear to my heart. I, at Pool Everywhere, lead strategy and people operations, obviously huge connections there. And I have a background in consulting, organizational design, and marketing. Also with me today is Courtney Rogan, who's going to be helping field some of the questions from all of you. Please feel free to interrupt. This is meant to be interactive, as is our ethos. Before I get into the meat of the content, quick context on who Pool Everywhere is. We're about 10 years old. We started the technology behind software-based audience response. And to date, we've had over 23 million polls presented. And we serve both university professors, corporate learning professionals, and internal communications and HR professionals for 75% of the Fortune 1000. Now, really, though, that doesn't quite tell you exactly who we are. One of the most important parts of our work and culture is agile software development. It is the core of how we get our work done, both on the software development side as well as on the business side. And as what we'll see is inextricably linked to that is this idea of people engagement. So not only is our product is the thing that we offer to the market all about engaging people at a human level, but it is also baked into our people strategy. So we put a lot of emphasis on the intrinsic motivators behind what we do, particularly the opportunity for mastery. And we'll come back to that a little bit today. Some of our successes have been 2x the amount of tenure of engineering staff, as is the market average. Some of the things that we're quite proud of. This whole idea, I just want to give a quick background on where this idea of Agile came from. And it's actually quite an old concept. Some date it back to the 70s, but it was formalized in 2001 when a group of software engineers went to the lodge at Snowbird, Utah. That's a picture of it there, quite a lovely scene, in order to write down the ethos that they had been bringing to software development. And as you can see, one of the left side is what they believe in, and the right side is important but not as important, is kind of how they phrased it. And throughout all of these themes, one of the constants is that people matter, and people matter more than process, and people matter than hierarchy, which starts to develop this whole idea of how does Agile deliver responsiveness. And it's the idea that people are much more responsive and much more adaptable than any of the processes or hierarchies that they may create. Businesses then took on this concept in full force as a way to adapt readily to the changing market that they found. Changes in the market, changes in competitors, changes in consumer demand. And the pillars of an Agile organization, you will find, I don't know, 20, 30 scores of different frameworks to describe what an Agile organization is. And they essentially boil down to these. Because things change constantly, you need to be learning constantly. And when you learn something, you need to be able to resource those learnings. And you need to be able to know what creates value. You need to have a goal in mind. And so with these 3 pillars, you have an Agile organization. And there's a huge variety of ways to get there. It's all of these pillars, all 3 of them rest, however, in a culture of openness, a culture of responsiveness, and of adaptability. And that, my colleagues in the HR field, particularly internal communications, is where we have a tremendous role to play. Our stakeholders are already recognizing how important this organization of the future is. There was a study that came out from my former employer, McKinsey, that said that in their most recent leadership survey, 75% of organization leaders said that building an agile organization was one of their top priorities. So, of course, given its top priority, we're probably there, right? We're probably there. In fact, no, of those who were surveyed in that, only 4% reported that they'd made a transition to being an agile organization. Because it's hard. And some of the barriers that we have identified as professionals in internal comms are largely around this cultural issue, that culture of responsiveness and adaptability. 53% in a recent survey from another consulting group, 106 Communications, identified the culture of the organization as a primary barrier. But I'd argue that these top 3 barriers are all related to culture. So what do we do? That is the meat of what we have to do. And there are 3 areas that I want to address in our webinar today where internal comms professionals have a tremendous role to play. And in fact, I'm probably biased, but I believe that we have one of the most important roles to play in shepherding our organizations into this future land. The first category that we're going to talk about is the space in which internal comms professionals advise. And this is in our leadership communications, which is a huge leverage point and a very large platform. The second one that we'll talk about is where we facilitate, and where we facilitate smaller conversations with smaller teams and smaller ways of working. And this is a place that even as we're facilitating, we're leading by showing people these tools, by introducing new responsive means of communicating. And then finally, and this is the one that I love, is where we get to model. And so we can model in our own internal workings and our own internal way of doing business, impact and iteration. First one we'll talk about is this idea of leadership communications, because it does make up quite a bit of some of our roles. Some of these are quite challenging. Having a responsive organization is one that listens, is one that doesn't always have the plan set out in all of the detail. I'm going to start with a way to look at these leadership communications that is most comfortable to implement, and then I'll get into one that is quite a bit more challenging. And then I'll provide some advice on preparing our executives to do those things. This first one is this idea of an audience choice presentation. So often these leadership rollouts have at their center some sort of kickoff. And so the idea here is that you have that kickoff, you have a vision, you have your messaging and your understanding of your employee needs, but then you turn over after introducing your vision, you turn over some of the power and some of the conversation to your audience. And the way that you do this is you have your presentation, you go out with your message, and then you've already prepared the executive to have several sub-chapters of their presentation. And then you give the audience, the group of employees assembled, the option of saying, which would you like to discuss? And even that very small, kind of almost subtle moment of inviting them is a huge point for engagement, and it grabs their attention, especially if you've not done this before. Another way to do this that's a little bit of a small step as well is we have a tool that is probably our most valuable tool, and it's a live updating word cloud. I don't have a picture of it in here, but the presenter app starts by asking the question, all right, colleagues, how are you feeling about the strategic changes I just presented on? And then people respond with one word, and the word cloud updates live, and it's dynamic. And there's very much a sense of a shared moment that the executive is empowered to respond to. So I'd say that's first step. The next kind of level of difficulty, but one that I hope to inspire you to pursue if you haven't, is a reinvented town hall. Town halls are not a new concept. They've been around for a long time. It's definitely a favorite tool of mine. But this is an idea of a town hall somewhat reinvented. So it's a movement from having get people excited standing to much more specific and we're going to do about them. Also, they're not.
Sam and Courtney, I'm not sure if you can hear me, but it sounds like you, and it looks like you may have disappeared. Thank you for your patience, everyone. I am going to attempt to get Sam and Courtney back here.
We are restarting right now.
Okay, perfect.
A connection issue. Sorry about the wait.
No, that's okay. Thank you for letting us know. So we just thank our attendees for their patience as Sam does get reconnected here. So Sam, is your audio connected? Because I could share the screen from my desktop.
All right, can you hear me again?
I can, yes.
Yes. Goodness.
So we are not sharing your screen. Do you have internet connectivity as well?
I do indeed. Okay. Thank you for coming back to us.
Excellent. So I'll get you to reshare your screen then.
Absolutely. Please. I'm on my way in. Perfect. I'm going to go ahead and play.
Excellent. There we go. Thank you, everyone, for your patience.
Yes, indeed. All right, back to reinventing the town hall. Talk about unscripted. So part of the reason it is unscripted is because the idea of this town hall reinvented is to invite conversation. I'm going to go ahead and switch to the next slide, which is an example of what that actually looks like in practice. This is an upvote, downvote tool that's used pretty widely amongst our customer base. And the idea is that whoever is leading this town hall asks for responses from the audience, asks for questions from employees, that then the rest of the employees in that room are able to upvote and downvote. And what emerges is a prioritized list that everyone in that room has opted into, giving it validity, giving it credibility, and also making it a very transparent process. Just to inspire you that this actually is done in real life, here's an example of one of our clients, Kohl's, who uses this on a regular basis. They've gone from one highly scripted town hall each year to one, they have 25 town halls every year, and it cascades through the levels. So they'll have a CEO version, which is the picture you see there, which is still a bit of a production, but has that dialogue component baked into it. And then they also have department ones that kind of tee off of this main one. And it's been quite an empowering, galvanizing tool for that group. The next idea that I'm going to give you is one that is a bit more challenging, and I will speak personally too. And this is a revamped employee survey. Employee surveys are one of the, at least in the research I've seen, one of the least highly rated channels for building an agile organization. Which should come as no surprise to those of us on the call. It's slow, it's tedious, it's heavy, it takes a while to get results back. That is kind of the opposite of agile. This turns that on its head. So the steps laid out there are the steps that we ourselves at Pull Everywhere follow religiously twice a year. We send out a very simple direct survey with less than 10 questions. We use the Gallup methodology for our engagement survey. We collect all the results. They're anonymous. We then gather everyone in a room and I distribute those anonymous results to everyone in that room, and I give them 15 minutes on their own to quietly review them. So we don't do any synthesizing, we don't do any shaping, we don't do any messaging. Then in that same room, some of us are remote at the time, but I open an up-vote, down-vote poll like you just saw, and I ask our employees and I ask our colleagues which issues jump out at them, which are most important to them. And the screenshot you see there is one of our, a smaller group of us did this. And these are actual results from our review of our own employee engagement survey. And then I discuss them as the head of people ops and aggregate. And then we, after the event, aggregate that feedback, which has already been prioritized for us. And we assign out actions, items to individuals and to teams in order to pursue. So it has this lovely feedback loop that we are able to transparently share our issues with our employees, get them to prioritize them for us, and then turn around and say that we've delivered on them. And it is game-changing. I will also tell you, it is terrifying. I think this is one of the few times at Pull Everywhere that I have gotten a little sweaty being in front of my colleagues because people don't hold back. And that brings me to the next kind of role that we as IC professionals have in preparing our executives for this agile organization and for this transparency, adaptability, and responsive cultural environment. So this is a checklist. You all will, I believe, get the deck after the talk, so no need to, get all of this down. Some of these are pretty standard for any type of leadership communication. Understand at a personal level what success looks like for them, not just organizational level. I've always prepared main points to be communicated and a draft of potential questions and answers. The big two here that are quite different is the idea that you make a plan for when the executive invariably needs to say, I don't know, because that will happen. And so empowering that executive to not only make that okay, but also have a name to call out for someone who will follow up makes that a bit easier. The other one is use moderation. If you're using our tool or a different tool, you should not use an audience response system tool that doesn't have moderation. I've done it, and it's not that people are it's not that people intend to embarrass anyone, but it's just a nice safety precaution and also makes the executive feel a bit more comfortable. All right. I'm going to put aside then our role in internal comms as an advisory to leadership in their communications and move on to our place where we can lead. And this is in facilitation. One of the things that was identified in this particular survey I mentioned earlier was the idea of what internal comms can do to better support organizations being agile. And the place where our stakeholders, which is the light blue, and ourselves in the dark blue varied most on what we believed was in this idea of use more evidence, and we'll talk about that actually in the last section, and this idea of more dialogue. And some of the ideas in the more dialogue are, no more command and control. We want you to facilitate and convene. We want you to advise. We want more open dialogue. We want more conversation. And I think this is a beautiful place for internal comms to start to facilitate some of these smaller conversations and empower department leads to take what is being said at the leadership level and bake it into our daily lives of our employees. This is another tool that I'll highlight very quickly. It's a spotlight. So what happens is in a free-form, free-ranging discussion, oftentimes those can be a bit intimidating. They can get off track. It's also quite easy for them to be dominated by a select group of people. And this particular tool opens this discussion to every single person in the room, but allows the facilitator to spotlight individual comments and individual thoughts at a time so that everyone is able to participate. It's almost like a crowdsource, but then you are able to control the pace of the conversation. Another kind of inspiration here comes from people we know quite well. These are two Yale professors. Gabriel Grant and Jason J. And they lead facilitation workshops where they try to guide executives on how to have difficult conversations. Their research actually started with climate change and sustainability discussions, but they've branched out into all sorts of difficult, trying conversations. And one of the things they do, again, on this theme of facilitating, is do an open-ended poll. So they'll ask the audience, okay, please tell us about a conversation that you're having difficulty having in your workplace. And then everyone will respond. And then they will be able to, from those responses, make comments that benefit the whole group. And also, if someone's a bit off, be able to guide them back into like the point of the exercise. So one of the things they do is, okay, please name for us, the key stakeholder that you're going to need to engage. And I've seen them take that and make it more specific and make it more real for everyone in the room, but at scale. And it's quite a beautiful thing. The other place that our role as facilitators can come in handy is not just the initial introduction of a vision, but then taking that vision and putting it into making sure that vision remains pure into the next steps. So the Prime Minister of India used our tool in order to do that for his new development plan, which is called A New India by 2022. And so he had this vision, he introduced it much like a CEO introduces this great strategic vision. And then the next step was then getting this baked into some of the operating models and some of the initiative areas. So we gathered 200 CEOs and different government representatives and had them brainstorm together in groups and then prioritize ideas for how to actually get this into being. So it was a really lovely way to kind of have the umbrella message, but then empower people in an open, responsive way to really be able to opine and shape it. All right, last but not least, certainly, this idea of impact and iteration, which is absolutely core to Agile. You need to have the eye on the prize, so you have a sense of direction. And then, because things change so quickly, you have to be able to iterate, learn, and then manage resources towards that. And this is a place that I love because this is a place where internal comms it's just us. We can manage our organizations and manage our communications and manage our way of working to model these principles for the entire rest of the organization. And it is profound. The first place to take this, though, is understanding metrics. So in addition to culture, one of the other foundations to an Agile organization is this idea of having a shared sense of metrics and having a shared sense of the data and ensuring that data is free-flowing. I don't really talk about this a lot here because it's not in the purview of internal comms to control that. However, in our own group, we can certainly pursue the metrics that matter most and make them available to every other person in our group. So these are some of the traditions I think most people on the call are probably familiar with. Some borrowed from marketing, like the open rates and click-through rates, and some kind of much more at home in the HR world around social listening and sentiment analysis. So I won't dwell on this because I think a lot of us are probably, at least in the early stages of pursuing this. The one that we've adapted actually from our growth analytics team is this idea of predefined sampling. So it's a pretty standard process in other fields, but this idea, and maybe some of you are doing this, where before you launch a communications effort, you identify a select group of names from within the group that would be receiving this communication, and yet before it's sent. I use an Excel spreadsheet with employee IDs and like a random selector. So it doesn't have to be fancy. And then after the communication goes out, you reach out to these randomly pre-selected names with simple questions. You don't even have to do this at scale. If you do it to 20 people out of 200, it's still data and it's still information. If you do it at scale, I suggest using a survey. If it's not at scale, 15-minute quick interviews is very, very productive for improving your learning about how that communication landed and how it affected that person in their role. And simple questions. What was the point of that communication? What do you recall about it? How do you think that changes your job? What other questions do you have about it? And even understanding that that person didn't get the communication, didn't hear it, didn't see it, that in and of itself is data. And what you do is you take that data, you document it, you communicate it amongst your team, you learn from it, and then you iterate. And it can be very powerful. And it's also very nice to be able to tell your stakeholders that this is how internal comms operates with their communications. Back to the idea that sharing evidence is something our stakeholders are desirous of. The other thing that is one of my favorite things, and something that was quite revolutionary when I first came from consulting to software about 6 years ago, is this idea of the team retro. Consulting doesn't do this, and most of the large financial institutions I serve don't do this. And it is the idea that each week, and then after every project, there is an in-depth retro to understand how it went, what went well, what went poorly, and what could we do better. And we do at Pull Everywhere a weekly team retro every single week. And some of them are meaningless, and some of them go by quickly, and some of them are quite meaty and influential. And the way we do this is, again, in that upvote, downvote poll, so that you get the automatic prioritization of what everyone in that room cares about in a transparent fashion. We also do longer in-depth retros following significant projects. And I'm going to give a shout out to Courtney on this one. The last one we did was brilliantly executed, and she sent information ahead of time for people to document their thoughts in writing. I think it took people 10 minutes each. And then she brought all of those to the group, and we did an upvote, downvote poll again on the ones that were most salient and most influential. That also gives time to track down some of the data around the retro. So in internal communication, how many people did open that email, how many people forwarded it, how many people responded to that intranet post, so that your data isn't just opinion at that point, but you actually have a chance to have a rich discussion. The other thing that's really important with this, much like the employee survey, is to take those learnings and document them. And then the next time you have a communication, maybe it's channel specific, maybe it's employee population specific, but you take those learnings and you incorporate them into the next effort. We do that particularly with our events. We also do that with our software teams. And we've made some pretty significant changes in how we've organized our software teams based pretty heavily on these weekly retros. So for example, we had been pretty primarily based in a division around front-end engineers and back-end engineers. And based on these retros, we decided to make a shift to having more multifunctional teams where everyone does everything full stack, as we refer to it. And that was a pretty powerful thing that has really changed the speed and quality at which we ship. All of these, in essence, allow Pull Everywhere to be a much more transparent organization than I think we would be otherwise. And transparency isn't something that we do just for the sake of it. And it's not something that is divorced from the rest of our operations. Instead, we bake transparency into all of the systems and processes we use. And why this makes us agile, why this is such a key feature of an agile organization, is because without that transparency of communications, of data, of motivations even, you're not able to make quick decisions, and people aren't empowered to put their learnings into work for the pursuit of a shared goal. So I'm quite proud of this particular aspect of our culture, and I think our engagement numbers around it are pretty nice indicators of our success in pursuing that. I hope this has been helpful. I'd love to, given we have a little bit of time, invite you all to experience this particular upvote, downvote, and actually make that kind of part of our discussion. So if you visit www.pullev.com/SAM, what you will see there is what your employees will see in a town hall, in a team retro, in your own department meeting, as you're brainstorming a particular piece of communication. There's an option to respond anonymously or respond as a particular screen name or a guest screen name. All right. Let's see if there's any. And then what also happens with this particular activity type is that you're able to see everyone else's response as well. All right, so there's some, oh, thank you. This was great. I'm so glad. How long should a retro be? Most of our retro, it depends on the project itself. So what we do in our weekly retro is we have it open throughout our town hall meeting. And so people can kind of respond with questions, and then we give about 5 to 10 minutes at the end of the town hall meeting for people to submit more questions, more comments, and other people to upvote, downvote. And we don't go through every single one together in the meeting. We usually do a cutoff around a certain engagement level, and that depends on the size of your group. And we make that very explicit up front. The people ops team does go back and review all of the retro points, because that's another area for data mining. And so we get insight into some of the issues that maybe aren't shared. They're not salient across the organization, but they percolated enough. So yeah, sometimes our retros, those weekly retros don't last more than, I'd say, 10, 15 minutes. A longer retro for a large project could be an hour over a couple days. All right, I'm gonna load 3 more responses. The question, did employees accept the transparency in this process, or can it hinder them from engaging? For us, transparency is one of our cultural values, and we, bake that into our recruiting system. We bake that into our performance and development management systems. So it's pretty key to who we are, again, because it has a purpose. And we did not. They enjoyed the transparency, and obviously, we're very clear that there's some things that we're not transparent about. There's some personnel issues, certainly some HR and personnel issues that are not shared and they're confidential, but people understand that. So no, in fact, it was the opposite. Not everyone, I will say, cares about everything. And so we've had to get better over time at offering transparency while also at the same time only actively providing it when it's relevant to the particular department or the particular individual. So I do think there is a bit of a balance there. Did you see engagement scores improve after implementing this? Absolutely. We absolutely did. We went up, if I'm going to get the numbers a bit wrong, but I believe it was 7 percentage points on our engagement scores. And again, we use the Gallup methodology. I think more importantly, the thing that I, as head of people ops, have really come to appreciate about this is that we're able to stop issues from being side conversations. We're able to squash gossip and kind of that unproductive communication that I think is a natural part of every organization. But by providing an outlet for those concerns that's open, that's candid, that's transparent, we were able to head it off. And I can give a specific example. We had a significant strategy change, which was accompanied by organizational changes. So we had some departures, and we communicated it as you do. But what I hadn't appreciated was the extent to which people had internalized that for their own particular roles. And it wasn't until we did our twice annual survey and upvote, downvote that came out. And it was tied up in a bunch of performance development communication that I don't think we were doing particularly well at the time. And not only was I able to address it in the moment, but then we were able as an organization to commit to being more proactive about communicating with individual employees around where they were in terms of development, and have a stronger kind of performance development matrix. So it helps me understand what people are worried about, so that we can be a little bit more proactive in it. And again, I think I'm quite proud of the long tenures that we have relative to our industry. How do you run predefined sampling? That is again a matter of the scale of the project and the scale of kind of what you're launching. So I do like to do it fairly often, but it also it's not cheap, right? So if you're going to launch, certainly for like a large strategic change or sharing of a vision, I definitely think that's an appropriate time to reach out to people. So it's driven by the work. So one question, we have 45 people, so I suspect our E-team would think we're too small for a poll. I think it helps our staff respond, engage anonymously. How do you sell this to the E-team when there's resistance? Yeah, that's absolutely fair. So the way that we did it, I mean, it wasn't a hard sell here because we have it, but the way I've done it with other teams is that it's easy to believe that that everyone amongst 45 people has a voice and is comfortable, but that's actually, according to research, false. And so I think the first time you do it, there may be resistance, but then you ask people, how was that after you've done it once? Again, transparency and open feedback. So when I've done it, I said, let's just try this. We're going to try something new. A room full of 45 people is actually not that small, frankly. There's always going to be someone who's not speaking up. Let's try it out. Let's give it a try. Make sure you give the space for people to be anonymous if they need to be, the space for people to have the time to reflect and respond in a thoughtful way. And you will see the conversation change dramatically. We did an event with a group of startup founders, and it was a learning event. And they were all really comfortable with each other. These are senior people. They're used to pitching to VCs. They're young, but they're used to pitching to VCs. And so they also were like a little bit like, do we need to do this? And what happens is that there's almost like a tiered opt-in to an upvote downvote poll. So just putting something out there as an idea is pretty low risk, and people generally opt into that. And then it's also pretty low risk to upvote or downvote something. That doesn't come at a great cost. But those two small steps of opting in invite and give permission to the larger conversation that results from the prioritized list. And so you kind of baby step your way into talking about real issues. And so, I mean, in terms of convincing people, I would say try it and then ask them. Because typically, like you do feel a difference if it's the right use of it. And I mean, the other way, if you're a particularly data-oriented team, like our engineers tend to be, there is research around extrovert versus introvert personalities, and the idea that group meetings are systematically alienate introverts who aren't as comfortable speaking out about their opinions and could have quite valuable opinions. So it's kind of an inclusion thing. There's also research that in group settings, and the research was done in large conferences, but that female participants in conferences ask disproportionately fewer questions than their numbers would suggest. So even when females are a majority of an audience in a conference, they ask fewer questions. And so again, like research suggests that like leveling that playing field for both introverts and maybe groups who are not predisposed to speaking out, according to the research, that it could be another way to convince. All right. And then another question from the webinar, is this embeddable into the company's intranet site? I believe so. We have enterprise clients who've done that and kind of baked it into their operations. Anyone who uses Slack, we have an integration into Slack as well that works well. We also integrate into PowerPoint, Google Slides, and Keynote. So all of that our kind of motto is we like to work where you work. And so we do make efforts towards that. But not being on the dev side, I couldn't tell you the exact specifics of it. Great. So in terms of follow-up, I believe we will send out the deck and I believe also the recording. And if there's any other case studies that I might be able to share in more depth, or if you'd like any more detail, I was so thrilled to get to do this. I hope you all can see that this topic is particularly near and dear to my heart. And I've dedicated a lot of my career to the idea of employee engagement and communicating in people-centric ways. If you would like to reach out, actually, I don't have my personal email on there, but it is sam@polleverywhere.com, quite easy. Sherry, is there anything else we have to do in terms of housekeeping?
No, well, I would like to thank you for presenting this webcast for us today, Sam. It's really very much appreciated, so thank you very much.
And thank you to you all at hr.com. You've made it wonderful, and I hope it was valuable.
And now just for our attendees, if you would like to view this webcast again, the archive recording and slides will be available for up to 7 days for our free members and without restrictions for those with the certification membership. Your feedback is very important to us, so please do take a few moments to fill out the exit survey that opened up in a separate browser page on on your computer. It opened up on a separate browser page on your computer, and make sure you fill that out for us, please. So give us your feedback on what you thought of our webcast today. And this does conclude our webcast. Again, Sam, thank you so much. And everyone, please have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.